All praise, glory, and honors most certainly due to the Most High of the patriarchs Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and peace to you in the name of Jesus. That you may blessing each and every time that I can come before you to preach the word of God. Never do I count it as a light thing to do so. Today I'm coming to you on the 4th of July, which is a day that commemorates, peace to you, the day that commemorates independence, the colonies in America gaining their independence from Great Britain. And I don't know if you can hear it on my end. I mean, people have around my location where I live at I live in a predominantly area where our people are located. People like me, is being frank. And they have been letting off or shooting fireworks for a month straight, every night. And even tonight, peace to you, even tonight, it's been stormy. It's been a heat wave where I'm at. You know, feels like it's 105 degrees. And then it starts raining. It's pouring down rain. And even in the rain, you still, not drizzling. I mean, it's raining hard. It'll start again, raining hard. All the whole time you're hearing fireworks. So people out in the rain, how does that work? I don't know. People out in the rain shooting off fireworks. Now, the irony is that the people who are doing this are commemorating a time in which they were enslaved. And so what I want to do today is I want to deal with a little history and in part speaking through the history of our people, what we've experienced, the so-called Negro, and speak through reading what Frederick Douglass said in New York, in Rochester, New York, on July 5th, 1852. Okay, because he was invited to give a speech. All right, and this is the day after a day that commemorated, obviously, independence. So he says, fellow citizens, pardon me, allow me to ask, why am I called upon to speak here today? What have I, or those I represent, to do with your national independence? Are the great principles of political freedom and of natural justice embodied in that Declaration of Independence extended to us? And am I therefore called upon to bring our humble offering to the national altar and to confess the benefits and express devout gratitude for the blessings resulting from your independence to us? See, he's basically saying this is why are you asking me to speak about independence when the people who I represent are enslaved? And then he mentions the Declaration of Independence, right? That was written by Thomas Jefferson. That was a declaration. We hold these truths to be self-evident, yada, yada, whoop de whoop, right? Then he talks about all these grievances, Jefferson does, that the colonists have against the king. And if you read the rough draft, I want to read a portion of the rough draft since he mentioned it here. A portion of the rough draft of the Declaration of Independence that was actually removed from and not included in the final copy of the Declaration of Independence. One of the grievances being this. Concerning the king, Jefferson writes, he has waged cruel war against human nature itself. How did he do this? Let's continue. Violating its most sacred rights of life and liberty in the persons of a distant people who never offended him, captivating and carrying them into slavery in another hemisphere, or to incur miserable death in their transportation thither. This piratical warfare, the opprobrium of infidel powers, is the warfare of the Christian in all caps, king of Great Britain, determined to keep open a market where men should be bought and sold. He has prostituted his negative for suppressing every legislative attempt to prohibit or to restrain this execrable commerce. and that this assemblage of horrors might want no fact of distinguished die. He is now exciting those very people to rise in arms among us. Okay, so what did he do? What did he do? He's saying that this man, this king, is enslaving people and snatching them from one hemisphere, taking them to another, right? Making merchandise of these people. And the irony is that one, they wouldn't agree over when they got together and talking about the, Declaration of Independence, they wouldn't agree on this copy because it had that in there. And number two, another ironic thing, or hypocritical, let me say hypocrisy, is that Thomas Jefferson himself owned slaves. Thomas Jefferson himself owned slaves. And I want to read something about Thomas Jefferson, just a little bit. If you want one of the most racist pieces, or historical pieces ever, is his notes on Virginia. But I want to read this here. This is from history.com concerning Sally Hemings. All right. I'm not going to read it all of it, but it is, and historians, they debate whether or not at what time he started this relationship with one of his female slaves. Some say she was as young as 14 because he accompanied him with his daughter. He was widow at the time to France. Some say it was a romantic relationship, and others say he was just doing what slave masters do. So it says in January 2000, the Thomas Jefferson Memorial Foundation accepted the conclusion supported by DNA evidence, because they tried to deny that for a long time, that Jefferson and Sally Hemings had at least one and probably 6 offspring between 1790 and 1808. Though most historians now agree that Jefferson and Hemings had a sexual relationship, debate continues over the duration of that relationship and especially over its nature. Admirers of Jefferson, who was a slave owner, right? And one thing about you, there's no romance in slavery. That's like you, I'm loving you, but I enslave you at the same time. No. That's somebody taking advantage of somebody. So it said admirers of Jefferson are inclined to see his relationship with Hemings as a romantic love affair, despite his public statements about race. Again, public statements about race you can find in the notes on Virginia, where he describes Black people as less intelligent, less beautiful, and says some other disparaging things. He says those who doubt the sterling nature of Jefferson's character, however, cast things in a much more negative light, seeing him as one more predatory white slave owner and his relationship with Hemings as proof of the hypocrisy behind his eloquent statements about freedom and equality. Hypocritical is an understatement. So back to Douglas. He says, what to God, both for your sakes and ours, that an affirmative answer could be truthfully returned to these questions. Saying, why are you asking me? He says, then would my task be light and my burden easy and delightful. But such is not the state of the case. I say it with a sad sense of the disparity between us. I am not included within the pale of this glorious anniversary. He is not included in it. He said, your high independence only reveals the immeasurable distance between us. The blessings in which you this day rejoice are not enjoyed in common. The rich inheritance of justice, liberty, prosperity, and independence bequeathed by your fathers is shared by you, not by me. The sunlight that brought light and healing to you has brought stripes and death to me. This 4th of July is yours, not mine. You may rejoice, I must mourn. To drag a man in fetters, those are chains, to drag a man in fetters into the grand illuminated temple of liberty and call upon him to join you in joyous anthems where inhuman mockery and sacrilegious irony. Do you mean, citizens, to mock me by asking me to speak today? How dare you? He said, how could you ask me to speak about liberty when my people are in chains? It's just like when you look at the situation with the national anthem today, people up in arms about some Negroes not wanting to stand when the song itself insults Black people. The stanza that was taken out was written by a racist. The song itself insults us. We have shed our blood under this flag, not the Confederate flag. We don't have to go to the Confederate flag to talk about Black folks shedding their blood under the American flag. People dying in the streets at the hand of those with police powers. I'll give you an example. This is the norm. I saw a man the other day. Put your hands up. Put them up. Sit down. Stretch your legs out. Spread your legs out. Now he's totally complying, and the cops just stand behind and tases him anyway. Now, why Negroes still out shooting off fireworks and you still not free? It shows where we're at mentally and spiritually, lost in darkness. He says, fellow citizens, above your national tumultuous joy, I hear the mournful wail of millions whose chains, heavy and grievous yesterday are today rendered more intolerable by jubilee shouts that reach them. If I do forget, if you really believed in these notions of life and liberty, how could you do this to a people? He says, if I do forget, if I do not faithfully remember those bleeding children of sorrow this day, may my right hand forget her cunning, and may my tongue cleave to the roof of my mouth. So there he quotes Psalm 137, where it said, oh, Jerusalem, Jerusalem. That's in the 6th verse. It says, oh, Jerusalem, Jerusalem. Let me just read it, because this is more fitting than I think he realized or that most people realize. In Psalms 137, it says, by the rivers of Babylon, there we sat down, yea, we wept when we remembered Zion. He said, we hanged our harps upon the willows in the midst thereof. For there they that carried us away captive required of us a song. And they that wasted us required of us mirth, saying, sing us one of the songs of Zion. So in Babylonian captivity, you were asked to rejoice. Sing us a song, make us feel good, even though you are in despair, even though you are captive. So it is even unto this day. They want some descendants of slaves who have been branded like animals, who have had feet and legs and testicles chopped off, who have been raped and plundered as a people, deprived of life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness, have been deprived of education. Those descendants to stand up and rejoice at somebody else's liberty while you were a slave. And Negroes still, right now, I don't know if you can hear it, still letting off fireworks like they've lost their minds. Took everything from you, stripped everything, but you want us to rejoice. They said, and it says in verse 4, how shall we sing the Lord's song in a strange land? He said, if I forget thee, O Jerusalem, if I forget home. So here, Douglas is talking about if he forgets his people. But here, the psalmist says, if I forget Jerusalem, because Jerusalem was destroyed. If I forget Jerusalem, let my right hand forget her cunning. If I do not remember thee, let my tongue cleave to the roof of my mouth. If I prefer not Jerusalem above my chief joy. But we as a people have totally lost the sense of home and land. We have been slaves so long, you have forgotten the idea of land. People died. People had to cut down all the wooded area. They had to fight and kill and commit genocide against the indigenous people in this country to take this country. They did everything to take this country. You got Palestinians over there in the land, hey, going up against insurmountable odds because they understand the importance of land, but you have Negroes who have been disconnected from their land for so long that we don't even have an idea that we have a land, but rather would try to connect with something that was built on your destruction, that was built on your enslavement, so we can all come together now and we want America. That has never been the case. That has never happened. And anytime you see a semblance of it happening, there's always an interest convergence. People say, well, it was a black president. You had black politicians, you had senators, you had representatives during Reconstruction. You had a lieutenant governor. You had many elected officials during Reconstruction. You say, well, what about Obama? Obama was elected because you had the worst economic crises since the Great Depression. And many whites, not all, but many whites who voted for Obama looked at him as the lesser of two evils. They had to ask the question, who is going to restore my way of life? Is it economically? Is it going to be a Republican, or is it going to be this well-educated Negro of the Democratic Party? Or he's not a Negro, excuse me. He's a Kenyan who was against reparations, by the way. So it says, fellow citizens, back to this. It says, fellow citizens, above your national tumultuous joy, I hear, oh, I read that already. Hold on, I'm in the middle here. It says, to forget them, to pass lightly over wrongs, and to chime in with the popular thing would be treason. Most scandalous and shocking, it would make me a reproach before God and the world. See, to turn your back on the suffering masses of his people, he said it would be treason. And that's really what many of the Negroes who have got out of the barrel, the many Negroes who are in national spotlight, wherever it be. See, many of our leaders come from areas which they should. Comedians, all of a sudden, are heroes. Musicians are heroes. Athletes are leaders, which shouldn't be the case. Person who dribbling the basketball, they could take a stand. Muhammad Ali took a stand, don't get me wrong. Jim Brown back in the day, Bill Russell, they took a stand. But understand, brothers and sisters, you need to come from a specific area when it comes to true leadership. And what do you have right now? You have a bunch of you have people ahead of organizations. You have a bunch of black politicians, and you have ministers and pastors who basically are committing treason against their people because they really turn their backs on the people. They are the buffer between the masses and the power structure. Control these Negroes. Malcolm talked about that. Why do you think that King is put before you so much? Because that's in a lot of ways, that's innocuous. In a lot of ways. And once he started to become more radical, because they give you the king, and they stopped in 1963. As he became more radical, he became more of a problem. Why do you think they killed him? When he called for a redistribution of wealth, it was time to get him out of here. What good is it to go in some white man's, or to be sitting in a white diner and you have no money to buy the coffee? So he said, redistribution of wealth, that'll get you killed. That will get you killed. But now today, these leaders are a joke. You don't have genuine leaders. Even I don't agree with Martin Luther King's program at all. But I do believe that that man was sincere as far as his people. But that wasn't a program that really the Lord put forth for his people. We are the people of the book. And integration wasn't the program. That was never the program. But nevertheless, it says, I shall see this day and its popular characteristics from the slave's point of view. Standing there identified with the American bondman, making his wrongs mine. I do not hesitate to declare with all my soul that the character and conduct of this nation never looked blacker to me than on this 4th of July. Today should be a day when you really reflect. If you are a descendant of those of the diaspora, you should understand that today is a day in which you should think about. He said, I'm gonna view things from a slave's perspective. He is one who experienced slavery and escaped physical bondage. What did it say? What happened to his people? This is Deuteronomy the 28th chapter. He says in Deuteronomy 28 and 68. Deuteronomy 28, I'm going to pick it up at 63. It says, and it shall come to pass that as the Lord rejoiced over you to do you good and to multiply you, so the Lord will rejoice over you to destroy you and to bring you to naught, meaning nothing. And ye shall be plucked from off the land whither thou goest to possess it. And the Lord shall scatter thee among all people from the one end of the earth, even unto the other. We read how in the rupture after the Declaration of Independence, how he said, hey, man, this king has taken people from one hemisphere to the other. And there thou shalt serve other gods which neither thou nor thy fathers have known, even wood and stone. And among these nations shalt thou find no ease. We found no ease, neither shall the sole of thy foot have rest, but the Lord shall give thee there a trembling heart and failing of eyes and sorrow of mind. Then it says in verse 68, and the Lord shall bring thee into Egypt again with ships. Now, he bringing you into Egypt represents bondage. That's why it tells you in Exodus 20, I brought you out of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. He said, I'm bringing thee into Egypt or bondage again. Like you were in Egyptian bondage, I'm bringing you into Egypt again, but this time you're going to go in ships. And that's how we got here, on slave ships. And when they fought the Revolutionary War, which we fought in every war, we're going to get to that in a second, we were enslaved. It says, and the Lord shall bring thee into Egypt again with ships by the way whereof I spake unto thee. Thou shalt see it no more again. And there ye shall be sold unto your enemies for bondmen and bondwomen, slave men and slave women, and no man shall buy you. This meaning you're not going to be redeemed. And this is what Frederick Douglass is saying. I'm going to look at it from the slave's position, right? So you got to ask yourself the question, who are all these people who were cast into slavery by way of slave ships? But you say something about it today, and they would tell you to forget. Now, you're supposed to, just since I mentioned it, if you want to celebrate something about the Revolutionary War, celebrate those men. I'm not saying celebrate Christmas addicts. Celebrate those men who were fighting for their freedom, these slaves who were fighting for their freedom against this country. This is from history.com also. It says the ex-slaves who fought with the British. It says when American colonists took up arms in the battle for independence starting in 1775, that fight for freedom excluded an entire race of people, African Americans. On November 12, 1775, General George Washington, another slave owner, decreed in his orders that neither Negroes, boys unable to bear arms, nor old men could enlist in the Continental Army. 2 days after that, after the Patriots military leader banned African Americans from joining his ranks, however, black soldiers proved their mettle at the Battle of Kemp's Landing along the Virginia coast. See, we some of the best warriors there were, but we fighting the number one, we've turned our back on God. That's why we can't win our battle. Number two, we fighting for the wrong thing. It said they captured an army commanding officer and provided pivotal in securing the victory for the British. After the battle, Lord Dunmore, the royal governor of Virginia, who had been forced to flee the capital of Williamsburg and form a government in exile aboard the warship HMS Fowey, ordered the British standard raised before making a startling announcement. For the first time in public, he formally read a proclamation that he had issued the previous week, granting freedom to the slaves of rebels who escaped to British custody. Right? So now you have an interest convergence there, even with that. You have an interest convergence with the British who say, hey, y'all got slaves, I'm going to turn these slaves against you. You come over here, you can be free. And these men fought as loyalists. Okay? Over the next several years, hold on one second, excuse me. I'm going to read it. Yeah, page 2. Dunmar's proclamation inspired thousands of slaves to risk their lives in search of freedom. They swam, dog paddled, and rowed to Dunmore's floating government in exile on Chesapeake Bay in order to find protection with the British forces. Okay? So now these people risk their lives trying to be free. Okay? Dunmore, he had even an Ethiopian regiment. But you should check that out. Check that out. I'm not going to read all of this. And you had blacks that you had our people that fought on both sides, right? Because eventually they see again, he said we don't want any of them to fight, but when they see the war happen, okay, bring them on. Then next thing you know, we disproportionately sent in the war as cannon fodder. We fought in World War. I'm talking about in the Vietnam War. That's what happened. We fought in World War I, and what happened? We fought in World War I, and came back maimed, and then came back with a sense of manhood. And what happened? Red Summers. Lynching of black men who just fought for this country in their uniforms. Experienced discrimination and Jim Crow after World War II. Fought in Korea. Let me say something real quick. I don't know what's wrong with people. Well, I do know what's wrong with people. They're people. They're human beings, and they lack understanding. They just lack understanding. Because I'm seeing some of these comments, and some of them will be a hell for review, and I'm showing them. And just like this man here say, you are Hebrew Israelite. We don't celebrate dead people. Those Negroes out of slaves are dead. We celebrate the living God of Israel. First of all, I'm not sitting here saying you need to go through some ceremony to honor the black loyalists. But what I am saying, because you sound ignorant, I'm just be honest. What I am saying is that if you want to hold somebody in esteem for what they've done or tried to do or respect what they've done, it should be men like this. Same way you would say, hey, David was somebody that was, well, even in more since David or Abraham or people in the scriptures. I'm not saying you should honor them above God. What's wrong with you? People always have something to say and don't have a clue of what they're talking about. Matter of fact, y'all, that's just like I was saying the other day. When you got to hold somebody down to teach them, don't come on this page teaching nothing. Get off my page. Don't get on here saying anything. You don't have the right to get on here and say anything. I'm not giving it to you. Ignorant. Like I'm sitting up here saying you're supposed to worship these people, honor them above God. I'm not saying that, but you want to get up, you want to have your own page. People ignorant. That's not godly, brother. Hey, you ignorant, you need to be told you're ignorant. If you ignorant, you need to be told you're ignorant. That's what I'm talking about. The mentality of people. I'm not wherever you at. I'm not over there typing anything. Why? It's ain't got nothing to do with that. Back to this. The Negro mentality. Whoa. He said, whether we turn to the declaration of the past or to the professions of the present, the conduct of the nation seems equally hideous and revolting. America is false to the past, false to the present, and solemnly binds herself to be false to the future. I always say, one of the biggest problems of the United States is it's her inability to look at herself in the mirror and see what she's done. That's why when you look at the whole Colin Kaepernick situation, the problem was he's saying something that's happening, you can't look at it. No, we not a bunch of killers. No, look at this country was based on bloodshed and genocide and slavery. I mean, that's what it was. You can't make it something that is not. And when you say, hey, this is what's going on, which actually is true patriotism, now you hate it. And just like when you can't accept something that you're doing wrong, you're going to destroy yourself. So it says, standing with God in the crushed and bleeding slave on this occasion, I will, in the name of humanity, which is outraged, in the name of liberty, which is fettered or chained, in the name of the Constitution and the Bible, which I disregarded and trampled upon, dare to call in question and to denounce, with all the emphasis I can command, everything that serves to perpetuate slavery, the great sin and shame of America. Do you really think that when it's all said and done, what America has done to God's chosen people is not going to be called on the carpet? You have helped forward the affliction. It is not astonishing that while we are plowing, planting, and reaping, using all kinds of mechanical tools, erecting houses, constructing bridges, building ships, working in metals of brass, iron, copper, silver, and gold, that while we are reading, writing, and ciphering, acting as clerks, merchants, and secretaries, having among us lawyers, doctors, ministers, poets, authors, editors, orators, and teachers, that while we are engaged in all manner of enterprises, common to other men, digging gold in California, capturing the whale in the Pacific, feeding sheep and cattle on the hillside, living, moving, acting, thinking, planning, living in families as husbands, wives, and children, and above all, confessing and worshiping the Christian's God, and looking hopefully for life and immortality beyond the grave, we are called upon to prove that we are men. See, that's one thing you see even until this day. We need to understand we are not inferior to anybody. But what's the problem? Deuteronomy 28 chapter. It says in verse 15, but it shall come to pass, if thou wilt not hearken unto the voice of the Lord thy God, to observe to do all his commandments and his statutes, which I command thee this day, that all these curses shall come upon thee and overtake thee. Right? So what he says, curse shalt thou be in the city, curse shalt thou be in the field, curse shall be the basket of thy store, and curse shall be the fruit of thy land, and the fruit of thy body, and the fruit of thy land, the increase of thy kind, and the flocks of thy sheep. Curse shalt thou be when thou comest in, and curse shalt thou be when thou goest out. This is the problem. You saying unity? See, I'm gonna just talk about y'all since y'all want to make comments. Unity is a must. You know what? Let me read something to you since you say unity is a must, because they left out of Egypt, right? 600,000 footmen. But understand that everybody not going to make it. Everybody not going to make it. And what I mean by that is, it's going to be even a purge of God's people. Why? For the mentality that I was talking about earlier. It's just not in us. When you look at Israel, and when you look at what happened in the wilderness, brothers and sisters, they got killed. Many of them died in that wilderness. Joshua and Caleb were over 20, but everybody else, they died. Go to Exodus, the 20th chapter, because he's gonna regather his people. I want to read you something here in Exodus, the 20th, Ezekiel, the 20th chapter. Everybody not gonna make it. How you gonna make it with mentality like we got? So now it says in verse 30, this is Ezekiel. You should see the example that's been set forth. Ain't nothing changed with this people. The stiff-necked, hard-headed people. That's why I said you got to wrestle them down to save their life. But a Negro want to get on here and tell me something. Ezekiel 20 and verse 33. As I live, saith the Lord God, surely with a mighty hand and with a stretched out arm and with fury poured out will I rule over you. See, you wouldn't have to do that if the people had a mindset to hear, but the people don't have a mindset to hear. That's why God got to deal with you in the way in which he deal with you. That's why he had to send you into slavery. That's why he had to leave you as prey to these predators. That's why that happened to you. He says, and I will bring you out from the people and will gather you out of the countries wherein ye are scattered. The mighty hand with a stretched out arm and with fury poured out. So he's going to gather his people, yes. But he ain't said, you can't read it here where it said, we got unity is the answer. Turn it back to your God. We'll read the answer in a second. But it said, and I will bring you into the wilderness of the people, and there will I plead with you face to face, just like he did when Moses took them, led them into the wilderness. And what does he say here? He said, like as I pleaded with your fathers in the wilderness of the land of Egypt, so will I plead with you, saith the Lord. That's coming. Now that's after great tribulation. That's after the darkness that's coming. That's after Jacob's trouble that's coming. And then he said, and I will cause you to pass under the rod, and I will bring you into the bond of the covenant. Although I sent you into slavery, I'm going to gather you out of all nations. But then he says something, and I want to read this for the hard-head, stiff-necked Negroes. It said, and I will purge out from among you the rebels. There will be a culling, brothers and sisters. There will be a purging. You think it's a purge at the movie theater? No, it's going to be a purging of his people. And I will purge out from among you the rebels, just like those who murmured against Moses. Just like those who asked, can he provide meat for us? Just like those who made a golden calf. You the same Negroes. You got the same mindset, and you're going to be destroyed. It said, I will purge out from among you the rebels and them that transgress against me. I will bring them forth out of the country where they sojourn, and they shall not enter into the land of Israel, and ye shall know that I am the Lord. That's what's going to happen. 2 Chronicles. 2 Chronicles, because here the answer is right here. It's not saying you got to use it. What we need to do is right here. Because you can sing UNITY like Queen Latifah all you want to. This is what you better do. This second Chronicles here. And here's Solomon in his prayer of dedication. He's talking about his people. You know, this stiff-necked people. He says in verse 36, if they sin against thee, For there is no man which sinneth not, and thou be angry with them, and deliver them over before their enemies, and they carry them away captives unto a land far off or near, like you Negroes, like me, right along with you. He said, yet if they bethink themselves in the land whither they are carried captive, and turn and pray unto thee in the land of their captivity, saying, we have sinned, we have done amiss, we have dealt wickedly. If they return to thee with all their heart and with all their soul in the land of their captivity, whither they have carried them captives, and pray toward their land, which thou gavest unto their fathers, and toward the city which thou hast chosen, and toward thy house which I have built for thy name, then hear thou from the heavens, even from thy dwelling place, their prayer and their supplications, and maintain their cause, and forgive thy people which have sinned against thee. First of all, what you gonna get? You gonna get together a bunch of Negroes who are unrepentant. You need to repent. You need to acknowledge that you have sinned against your God and turn back to him in sincerity and in truth. You want freedom, you want liberty, you want land. That's what you need to do. What you gonna get all together and sin some more? What you gonna get all together and be rebellious? You need to acknowledge that you sinned against God. Deuteronomy. I done told you what you need to do. Deuteronomy, the 4th chapter. Deuteronomy, the 4th chapter. And Moses told you what was going to happen to you before it even happened. And he's telling you what you need to do even before Israel went into the land. Verse 26, he said something about you. He said, I call heaven and earth to witness against you this day, that ye shall soon utterly perish from off the land whereunto you go over Jordan to possess it. Ye shall not prolong your days upon it, but shall utterly be destroyed, and the Lord shall scatter you among the nations, and ye shall be left few in number among the heathen, whither the Lord shall lead you. And that's where these Negroes sitting right now. Still rebellious, still got the same mindset, still in the same condition, still a slave, but you want to get on here and tell me something. What you need to do is listen to what thus said the Lord. It said in there, ye shall serve gods the work of men's hands, wood and stone, which neither see, nor hear, nor eat, nor smell. Then he said something that should sound familiar. He said, but if from this thou shalt seek the Lord thy God, thou shalt find him. If thou seek him with all thy heart and with all thy soul. That's what you need to do. When thou art in tribulation and all these things are come upon thee, even in the latter days. If you can't see, in the latter days, you're blind. You are deceived. You are in darkness. If thou turn to the Lord thy God and shalt be obedient unto his voice. That's what he needs. Talking about some unity. Man, you better get a clue. For the Lord thy God is a merciful God. He will not forsake thee, neither destroy thee, nor forget the covenant of thy fathers, which he sware unto them. It's all about you turning back to the true and living God. And stop being rebels.